I'm James Bailey and I've been working in project management for over 2 decades. I started off as a graduate trainee and worked my way up to Associate Director. And in that time, I've delivered over £1 billion worth of value to the central government, the civil service, the police force and even the space agency. I'm also an accredited PRINCE2 trainer and the founder of Prepare to Lead, which is a free community for project management professionals like you who wants to advance their career strategically. I'm telling you this not to impress you, but to show you that what I'm about to share is based on real projects and real decisions. Now, if you search online for PRINCE2, it's likely to say it's a project management methodology with 7 processes, 7 principles, and 7 practices. And that is why I'm going to show you exactly what PRINCE2 is. So think of PRINCE2 as a way of thinking about projects. So here we have your project journey. It has a start and it completes with outcomes. Now, PRINCE2 is to answer 3 fundamental questions for every project, for every stage, and for every conversation. And that is, why are we doing what we're doing? What are we doing? And who decides? That's it. Everything in PRINCE2 comes back to answering these 3 fundamental questions. And that is important because most projects focus on tasks, deliverables, meeting deadlines. Now, all of that is valuable, but it's not what gets you promoted. People that get promoted are those that are entrusted with more responsibility, bigger budgets, and can answer these 3 questions clearly, confidently at any single moment. So let's start with the 7 principles. The first being continued business justification. So here we have your business case, and that starts before your project starts, and it continues over everything else to the end of the project and on into benefits. And that's because every decision throughout the life of the project is referred back to the business case. And that's important because it is easy to build the wrong thing incredibly well. You can be on time, on budget, to high specification, but if it's the wrong thing, that is a complete waste of work. To give you a real life example, I worked on a project that had been developing the business case and the architecture for the outcomes for an extended period of time. And it came to a point where we had to stop and reassess and ask ourselves a difficult question. Do we actually have enough money to deliver the outcomes that we need? And it turns out we didn't. So we stopped and we changed direction completely. We took our remaining budget and we went to our existing supplier and asked them to develop their systems and their processes to give us the outcomes that we needed. Now, at the time, I didn't understand the decision. Simply because we'd made a lot of progress, we'd done a lot of work, and why would we then stop and hand over our budget to the very organization that we wanted to cut out of the loop? But it turns out that that was the right decision because they understood our technology, they had the capacity, and they could deliver what we wanted faster and cheaper. Now, that is a very good example of continued business justification as PRINCE2 intends, because we didn't continue to charge ahead. We stopped, reassessed, and found a better solution to get the outcomes we required with the remaining budget. And that is why in PRINCE2 at every single stage, we are asked that difficult question. Are we still doing the right thing? And that is because technology changes, budget changes, resources changes. And what made sense at the start of the project doesn't mean it's going to make sense 6 months further on. So the next principle is learn from experience. Now, every single project is built on from lessons from previous projects. What went wrong, what went well, and what did we learn? And they're called lessons learned. And I'll be honest with you, I struggled with this for years because I didn't understand what I could learn from a project that happened some time back, had different circumstances and a different team. Now, after all, I was a project manager, right? And it's my job to figure things out. But that wasn't only wrong, it was incredibly arrogant. And what I understand now is that when a lesson learned is captured well and isn't just a dry entry in a log, it holds an enormous amount of value, because that is what education is actually built on. It shows you patterns of what went wrong, what went right, and what was done to overcome them. And if you learn those lessons, should you face a similar problem in the future, it is able to save you not weeks, but months of wasted effort. And that is why I now take a lot of value when I get to an end of a project or a stage to assess what I struggled with and what I did to overcome those struggles. And not only for the next project, but for a future interview or a conversation with a senior manager where I need to explain something that I've learned and how I'm using that lesson to move forward. And this is important for you too, because in a future interview, when the interviewer asks you, tell me about your experience, you no longer talk about what you've just done. You can give a real example of a difficult situation, what you were thinking, what you did and how you adapted, and how you can use that lesson for future work with them. And that is what senior professionals do. The next principle is defined roles and responsibilities. So this is incredibly important. So here we have your board, you have your project manager, and you have your team. Now, this shows you exactly who's accountable for what. And I don't mean just their job titles. I mean, who owns the business case? Who manages the delivery throughout the project? And who makes the decisions? And this helps us because it shows you exactly where you sit within the project and what you're responsible for. And it allows you to see what that next level, what you want to move into, actually looks like. Now, the next principle is managed by stages, and each project will have multiple stages. And in PRINCE2, we plan and manage our projects by stages. The first stage, having the most detail, because this is the stage that we are currently delivering. And then the next stage will have less detail because we don't necessarily have all of the information available. And then the final stages will have even less information, but enough information so we know where we are going. Now, this principle literally saves you running off the cliff. For example, I was working for Lloyds Bank at the time, which happened to be the UK's largest retail bank. And we had a directive from senior management to put more detail into each of the stages because they wanted more visibility of the resources, the costs, and the decision points. Now, all of that sounds reasonable, right? But what actually happened is that the program managers and the project managers put an enormous amount of detail into stages that were 6 months and even years into the future. And those plans became very big and difficult to maintain. And my planning team at the time ended up working to early hours of the morning just to meet those deadlines. And that is the true cost of trying to plan everything in one go. And that's why PRINCE2 says, when we plan in stages, the detail are in the first stages, because it understands that information is developed as we deliver. Now, that's not a shortcut or a cheat, but it just acknowledges that we are allowed to develop and adapt as we progress. The next principle is focus on products. So if we take a closer look at the stages, each stage has a series of products that delivers into them. Because a stage is confirmation that products have been delivered before we move on to the next stage. And a product can be anything tangible, like a car, or intangible, like a plan or training of a team. Now, this is key. Every product needs a detailed description, a specification, an acceptance criteria, and what does complete look like. So for example, this video, I needed to develop the curriculum, the content, the platform, the structure, and have them clearly defined. And this video is actually about PRINCE2 and not PMP. And being clear on that prevents me from explaining every single project methodology on this project journey. And it focuses me on what is essential. And that is actually why a lot of projects fail, because they focus on the doing and the activity. And when you focus on products, you end up focusing only on what matters. Now, the next principle is managed by exception. And if we take a look at each of the stages as well, we set a tolerance for the delivery of those stages. And if we deliver within tolerance, we can deliver. And this is currently being managed by the project manager. However, if we slip outside of this tolerance, that's when escalation happens. And in this example, it's then escalated to the project board. And here's why it matters, is that this principle is actually about trust. Now, I worked with a boss that worked exactly in this way, and that is he outlined what the deliverable needs to be and set the boundaries. And then he let me and my wider team go off and do the work. Yes, I made mistakes, but because he was generally open, it allowed me to approach him and say, this is what I've delivered, this is what I was thinking, and this is where it's gone wrong. And he was able to come back and give me very open and direct feedback. Now, that relationship worked incredibly well because he still had visibility of what was required, but it gave me accountability and responsibility for the outcomes that I was delivering. And that empowered me to take that work forward. And to be honest, during that time, I actually delivered some of my best work. Now that's managed by exception. And here's the career bit. If you are the person that delivers with intolerance and only escalates what matters, you become the person that is trusted to work independently. And that is what gets you promoted. The managers that ended up giving me the most freedom were the ones that trusted me the most. And I ended up working harder for them, not because I had to, but I wanted to prove that their trust was well placed. Now, the last principle is tailor to shoot. As PRINCE2 isn't a rigid formula. It is a framework that you adopt to the scale, complexity, and the context of your project, and not the other way around. But there are some things every project must have, and that is a continued business justification, because that gives you your why. Defined roles and responsibilities, because that gives you the who, and focus on products, because that gives you your what. Now, those are non-negotiable because they exist in every single project, but everything else is scalable. So let's just zoom out and say that this is a standard project, but the project you're delivering is much smaller. You're delivering. So in that case, you can actually merge some of your stages and even reduce the governance. However, the principles still remain. You just change how you apply them. So let me give you an example of a project that got this completely wrong. At the time, I was working as the project office manager, and I was accountable for all of the documentation for that project. And the head of project management said to me, you are to complete every document and every section of every document. And if you don't need that document or that section, you need to write an explanation why. Now just think about that for a moment. I was spending a considerable amount of time writing explanations for sections in documents that weren't needed or added any value to the project. And when I challenged this, I was told that the person who wrote those documents must have had a clear reason for putting that section in. Therefore, if I wanted to deviate from that, I needed to explain why. The result was that I became a bottleneck for that project because I was spending so much time writing rather than focusing my time on delivery, managing risks, and planning. Now that's not PRINCE2, that's bureaucracy dressed as PRINCE2. Because a small internal project doesn't need the same amount of governance and control as a £100 million project. As you're to tailor the framework to the project and not tailor the project to the framework. Because knowing when to apply the full framework and when to scale it back is the judgment. And that's the judgment that senior managers expect. Now that's the 7 principles, but PRINCE2 also has processes and procedures. I'm not going to go into detail in them here because that's what the training is for, but I am going to give you the headlines. The practices are the disciplines that run through the entire project lifecycle. Think of them like the backbone. We have the business case, organization, quality, plans, risk, change, and progress. Now, these aren't things that are done once at the beginning of the project. For example, take the business case. It is written at the front, but it's referred to at every single stage of the project. Risks aren't just captured once, they are monitored throughout the project. And quality specifications aren't just written and ignored, they are addressed at every single checkpoint. Now, the processes are activities that happen at certain points across the project. For example, we have starting up the project, initiating the project, controlling the project, directing the project, managing the stages, managing the boundaries, and closing the project. And together they give you the complete map of the project. It takes a project from idea through to delivery, answering the why, the what, the when, and the who. And when you understand this, you can position yourself anywhere on the project. You can see where you are and where you need to go to get there. And that's the power of it. Now here's the bit that no one ever tells you about PRINCE2. And that is, it's not actually about project management. It's about credibility. It's about being able to walk into the room and demonstrate that you know what a project is at every single level. And not just the doing, but the structure, the flow of information and where the decisions are made. And when you have that, people notice. Just like when I walked into that interview at Compact Computers and I drew my plan out on the whiteboard, the program director noticed. He understood that I could see the full picture and I could be trusted to work independently. And that's what PRINCE2 gave me, and it can give it to you too. Now, if you want to understand exactly where you are within your project management career, you can take my free training. It's in our community. It's called the Project Career Map. And it will show you exactly where you are, where you need to go, and what you need to change to get you to that next level. Now, if you also want to speak to me directly within the community, you'll be able to book a free 20-minute one-to-one, no sales pitch, no agenda, just you explaining where you are and where you want to go. So you have two ways of taking this forward. Join the community, use the free content, and connect with me.